We're in the Gospel of Luke. We are in chapter 10. We're looking at verses 38 through 42. I thought that'd be very apropos for all the responsibilities that you're going to be hammered with for the fourth, getting ready, right? So this will be a good passage to take a look at. How does this passage emerge? Well, in the context, remember in Luke 9, Jesus has resolutely set his face to Jerusalem. So now everything in the Gospel of Luke from here on out is pointing toward the cross. And so in chapter 10, he begins to lay the foundation for the people of God, how we are to serve in the kingdom work, the first part of chapter 10, how we're to be neighbors to those in need, verses 25 through 37 that we looked at last week related to the Good Samaritan. And thirdly, how we as the people of God are to be worshipers in a distracted world, in a world that is filled with worry, how we are to be overcomers and worshipers in verses 38 through 42. I think we can all relate to this cute little poem by about a cow. It said, "The worry cow would have lived till now if only she had saved her breath. But she feared her hay wouldn't last all day, so she mooed herself to death." Come on, that's the biggest joke I got all day. That was good. Come on, let me hear it. That cute little rhyme carries with it a pretty powerful and convicting punch. And that is that worry in our life is dangerous. Worry in our life is lethal. So God wants to communicate to us how his care transcends the circumstances of worry all around us. Once we grasp that, we will move to worship in a distracted world. So today, here's what we want to cover. We want to look at the reasons for worry, the reasons that emerge that seem to justify worry in our life. We want to then look at what God says is the root cause of worry. It's not in those reasons that we tend to want to say, well, look at, surely anybody should worry in this situation. So God's going to reveal to us what the real root problem of worry is, and we might be surprised. But thirdly, he's going to give us the remedy that we need so that we can live a life of worship instead of a life of worry. So you ready? Let's delve into it. First of all, let's address the issue of the reasons why we worry. What we're going to find in this passage is that the reasons that are often given for worry, let's see, time constraints, work pressures, expectations, either internal or external upon us, and then future uncertainties. What's going to happen? What's going to happen if this takes place? What happens if that doesn't take place? And those things. What we're going to find out is those areas that normally we view as, hey, they are precipitating causes for worry in our life. All of them come to bear in this story. All of these create worrisome situations in our life. Even future uncertainties. I read that the number one predictor of an employee's health isn't their age, isn't their gender, isn't their work responsibility. The number one predictor of an employee's health is job security. Job security. Yeah. Worry is that lethal. Worry breaks down our system in such dramatic ways. Worry can have a crippling effect upon us emotionally and, yes, even physically in our life. What we see is that Martha here is in the midst of a perfect storm because she doesn't have just one of these things coming on her. She's got all of them. Everything is coming to bear at this time of this particular meal. Let me show you how you can see all the pressures going on and really understand and sympathize with what she is going through. This situation is fraught with the potential of worry at every step. You see, this wasn't just a normal meal. Jesus has come to Jerusalem here because it is feast time. That's what the Jews did. They would come to Jerusalem a couple of times each year. In fact, there were 3 feasts it was incumbent upon Jews to go to Jerusalem to be a part of. There were a couple in the spring, and then there was one in the fall. It was called the Feast of Tabernacles. And Alfred Edison, the brilliant New Testament scholar, has years ago showed that this account of this meal in Bethany, which is a suburb of Jerusalem, this was taking place in the fall. In other words, this is taking place during the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, why would this be an issue of time pressure and work responsibility? Because during this 1 week of this feast, you didn't eat and sleep and live in your home, but you erected a leafy booth right outside your home, and that's where you would cook. And now it can't be just sitting down at the kitchen table and eating. You got to take it into the leafy booth. You got to eat there, and you got to live there, and then you got to sleep there. And you had people that would be coming in and living in the leafy booth with you during that time. So this was an incredibly pressure-filled time. Not only that, but we also read that Josephus, who was an historian at the end of the first century, he wrote around 90 A.D., a Jewish historian, and he shared how the Feast of Tabernacles was what we would say it's Christmas 10 times over. What Josephus highlighted was nobody wanted to miss this feast. I mean, this was the one feast that if you couldn't make any other, you didn't want. This was such a festive time for the kids, and you can well imagine it's like living in a tent, right? They're ready for it, right? They're ready, and they're going to have fun with it. And so this was just an incredibly festive time. It still is to this day. Josephus mentioned that this was such a big deal that a town the size of Lydda, which is about population-wise, would be about the size of New Bern, all right? The whole city went up to Jerusalem to this feast, and they left the city guarded by 5 men. Can you imagine your whole community leaving, and you only got 5 people guarding the whole city? I mean, wow. That shows you everybody was saying, I'm going. You can stay in guard, but I'm going. Nobody wanted to miss this time. So Jerusalem literally is busting at the seams. What normally is a little over 100,000 population in this walled community of Jerusalem now is facing a population influx of about 1.5 to close to 2 million people during that week. You can imagine the sanitary issues, the food. I mean, come on, let's just think for a moment what that influx would do. I mean, it would literally, it was bursting at the seams. So much so that the Talmud, which relates to expectations and future uncertainties, the Talmud, which was Jewish writing at the time, mentioned that during this time, obviously, people need places to stay, right? Mentioned specifically Bethany. Mary and Martha are from Bethany. It's a suburb just, within a stone's distance to the east of Jerusalem. It's a suburb of Jerusalem, like James City to New Bern, all right? They specifically noted Bethany as known as a place of hospitality. So now you got all these expectations, right, placed upon you. And the Talmud mentions this, last point on this, to show you that poor Martha is just in over her head. The Talmud said that, now Bethany is noted for its hospitality, welcoming people. Did you know, ladies, and you can truly appreciate this, did you know that if you had room, you were supposed to fly a flag out in front of your home indicating there was more room, come on in. Whoever. Wow. Jesus shows up with all his disciples. Sure, come on in. Not, I don't know, come on in, everybody. If you got room and you're noted for hospitality, you got to make more room for everybody during that particular week. Now, can we have a little more empathy to what she's going through? I mean, this is the perfect storm, right? Time pressure, work responsibility, expectations, internal, external placed upon you, future uncertainties at the time. I mean, literally, you put it all together, and Martha has a lot on her plate, pun totally intended. Didn't you get that? No, never. All right. She's got a lot. It's a perfect storm. And so what do we read? Does she disappoint us? No. We read in verse 40 that Martha is distracted with all her preparation. You see, here's the problem with worry in our life. When we rationalize the circumstances and we create in our mind these reasons that justify worry in our life, we can even pretend and we even can convince ourselves that we can justify worry before the throne of God. I mean, who wouldn't worry under these circumstances? In fact, anybody not worrying, I'd worry about, is sort of the attitude. So we think surely God is going to cut us a break. I mean, who wouldn't be worrying? When we face these reasons, it's easy to check off all this rationalization about anybody in their right mind would be worrying now. So what Jesus does here is he gets to the heart of the matter for us. What Jesus is going to communicate is these are worrisome situations, but they don't justify worry for the child of God. What he's going to reveal is the root for worry isn't in the circumstances you and I face in life. We want to justify by our circumstances. But God is revealing to us the real root problem for worry in each of our lives is not in the circumstance. It is in the heart. See, worry is a lifestyle that calls into question the care of God upon my life in this particular situation. What I begin to do is I begin to view, and I become shaken and uncertain about the care of God in my life. And you see how I've done it? How I've justified worry? Because I've not viewed it as a lifestyle, a crippling lifestyle about my understanding of the care of God in my life. I view worry based on the particular situation and circumstance that I am confronted with. Let me show you. In verse 40, all translations miss this, all right? Where it says, Martha was distracted with all her preparations. A lot of stuff going on. No. The Greek is literally a singular, not a plural, which means that Martha is distracted by this preparation. She can just, look, it's just this one. I don't have a problem with worry. It's just this situation. And the problem with our lifestyle of worry is we never admit it's a lifestyle. We think, nah, it's just this problem. You remove this problem, I'm all right. Yeah, till the next problem arises, right? And it just keeps on going. And so what Jesus is going to bring out is, no, worry isn't induced by the circumstances of your life. Worry is a lifestyle choice that calls into question at all kinds of situations the loving care of God upon my life. Look at how Jesus cuts to the quick in verse 41. But the Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about the plural, so many things. But only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Jesus highlights this is a lifestyle in which you call into question. I mean, she in verse 40, she says to the Lord, don't you care? Can you imagine that? The Lord right there with you. And she is so distracted by what's going on in her life that she has lost sight of the one fundamental thing every child of God has to be anchored to, which is the care of God. You know, that's how lethal worry is in our life. You know what the real irony about this situation is? She is actively involved at this Feast of Tabernacles in the one feast that celebrates what? The care of God over our lives, right? The Feast of Tabernacles, why would you live in that leafy booth for a week? It was to remember how God had cared for you for 40 years in the wilderness when you had no food to fix, when you had no home to live in, and when you had no mall to go shopping at. Remember how Deuteronomy 8 says, for 40 years your sandals didn't wear out? Wow, I'd like those type of sandals, right? And so the Feast of Tabernacles was a yearly reminder of the one thing most important for every child of God. It was a reminder of how much God cared for us in our weakest, most vulnerable, yes, worrisome circumstance. Can you imagine the worry of those who left Egypt, home, and food? There was no food line to drop in the desert to go see, right? They're leaving their house, they're leaving everything, and they're in a wilderness for 40 years. And all they have to go on is one thing: the indescribable love and care of God. And so the Feast of Tabernacles was wholly designed to remind us year in and year out of that one certainty in life: the loving care of God upon his people. And on this feast, worry has become so lethal that she actually says, Lord, don't you care what I'm going through? How many times have you said that in life? Because of time constraints or expectations, internal or external upon. Lord, don't you care what I'm facing, what I'm going through? You see, worship is intricately connected to the care of God in your life. You can't worship God properly without a fundamental ability to rest in the loving care of God. Worship will either overcome worry or worry will overcome worship, but the two will not coexist in your life. Why? Because what is worship? Worship is all that we are, responding rightly to all that he is. Who is he? He is the loving Father who will provide for his children. So if worship is all that I am, rightly responding to all that he is, then I cannot adequately worship in a spirit of worry. Worry is that lethal physically, emotionally, and yes, spiritually in my life. Now we see how insidious this lifestyle of worry is for the child of God, which is why God's not going to grade on a curve. See, he takes it personally. You know why God hates worry in my life and in your life? It is because not only does it keep me from truly worshiping God, all that I am, rightly responding to all that he is, because I'm calling into question his care in my life. But secondly, he hates worry in my life because it is a character assassination of him in my life. I'm calling, the one thing that I should be crystal clear on is the care of God in my life. Worry clouds that. And I can't see beyond that time pressure. I can't see beyond that work expectation. I can't see beyond that expectation of the moment. I can't see beyond my fear of the future here. And the one thing I should be crystal clear on, that I should be able to celebrate in a festive way, is the loving care of God in my life. And I can't get beyond that circumstance. And it is a character assassination of God in my life. I read years ago of a teacher, this is back in the day when a teacher could do this. Teacher had a target, and he told his students that anytime they felt worried that week, they could take darts and throw it at the bullseye on the panel. All right? All week long, they were free to get up anytime they started feeling pressure, feeling worried, feeling anxious, and throw the dart at the bullseye. All week long. And so they did it all week long, right? At the end of the week, he said, now let me show you what all your worry did. And he goes over, he takes the target down, and he turns it over, and it's a picture of Jesus riddled with dart holes. This is what worry is. It is a character assassination of God's care in my life. Satan loves to promote opportunities for worry in my life and in your life because it's his great way of assassinating the character of God for us. So what's the remedy? The remedy is, as Jesus said in verse 41, you're worried and bothered about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. It's seeking first things first, right? Only one thing is necessary, and Mary has chosen, he uses Mary as a great example of someone who had the ability in the midst of pressure situations to keep first things first. You know, I got to be honest with you. When I have a lot on my plate, either time or work or expectations or uncertainty, when I have a lot on my plate, the hardest thing for me to do is remember first things first. That may not be true of you. It's true of me. I know what I should be doing first, but let me just dive into this, get things going and moving along, and maybe at lunchtime I can get back to first things, or maybe at supper time, or maybe at the end of the evening I'll get back to. I know nobody needs to tell me what first things first looks like. No one needs to tell me what first things should be in my life. And it's not that I have a resistance to it. It's not that I don't want to do first things first. But the irony is the more I have on my plate, the harder it is to do the first thing first. And so Jesus is calling us back. And he's saying, you know, here's the remedy for worry in your life. Keep the first things first, which is what? Seeking God in a distracted world. See, it is so refreshing to wake up and realize each and every day, I live in a distracted world. I live in a worry, sick, filled world. And wow, God has given me the opportunity to rise above it. Just to acknowledge that, you know what? This is the world I live in. So what God wants me to do is seek him first in the distracted situations that inevitably come about daily in my life and in your life. You see, Martha, we read in verse 40, was what? Distracted with all her preparation. I got to tell you this. Distracted literally means to be pulled away. And when I saw that, I stopped and thought, wow. The obvious question is, what is she being pulled away from? What is she being pulled away from? What am I getting pulled away from when I think I got so much on my plate? What am I being pulled away from? I'm being pulled away from the one thing that matters most in my life, an unshakable awareness of his loving care that I want to anchor on today. Yes, Lord, this is a day fraught with a lot of worrisome situations. There are a lot of overwhelming challenges today. So I don't want to get pulled away from you, because that's what these things threaten to do in my life. I want us to tackle this together. I want your loving care to walk with me every step of the way in these time constraints, or this work responsibility, or this expectation, or even these uncertainties that I'm facing right now. I want to walk them with you, God. I don't want them to pull me away from that unshakable awareness of your loving care in my life. Because the moment you become shaken and pulled away, you're going to cry out, "Don't you care? Don't you care? Lord, don't you care what I'm going through?" So, Jesus says, don't let this distracting world do that to you. Do not let it pull you away from celebrating the loving care of God upon his children. Let me close with this verse. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. It's a beautiful verse. You should, if you haven't memorized it, write it down. Memorize. It's a great verse for this passage, where Peter says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to cast all your anxiety upon him. Why? Because he cares for you. Don't ever let a worrisome situation cause you to worry about the care of God upon your life. Be anchored to it. Casting all your anxieties. By the way, that's the same Greek word for worry used, Jesus said of Martha. You're worried, same word. It's translated either as worry, anxiety, or care in the Greek New Testament. Right? And he says, here's what you need to do. You got some worry right now? What do I do with it? You cast it upon him. Why? Because he cares for you. Now, I got to show you what this casting looks like. This word is pretty unique. It's not ever used fishing in the Gospels. This word is only used twice in all the New Testament. This word casting. It's used right here, 1 Peter 5. It's used only one other time, and that's in the Gospel of Luke, in Luke chapter 19, when Jesus at the Palm Sunday is making his descent down on the donkey, when he's about ready to get on the donkey. And the text says that they cast their garments onto the donkey so Jesus could ride on it. In other words, it wasn't throwing some fishing net and you keep it and pull it back. That's not the word. This is actually getting rid of something and placing it on something else. When they took their cloaks and they placed it on that donkey, they no longer could wear that coat on. It was given over where Jesus could get on that donkey and ride on it. They had cast it, and it was no longer theirs. It was laid upon the donkey, and because the donkey's back was designed to carry it. So what we're being told to do here is, whatever your worry is right now, it is time for you to cast it onto the loving care of God. How do you know he'll take it? It's such a small little thing. You think God cares about that? You think God cares about, that little thing in your life? You bet he does. Cast it because he cares for you. Here's the bottom line truth. You will either live your life under the cares of this world, or you will live your life under the care of God. You won't do both. You will do one or the other. Dear friend, it is time to take whatever God's Spirit is saying to you. Yeah, that kills you, doesn't it? That gets you every time, doesn't it? Yeah, God, but I'm so afraid. Cast it. Cast it on the one designed to carry it. Will he take it? Yeah, because he cares for you.